All right. Well, welcome to week 3 here of Personal Finance. Thanks again for your patience last week. Kind of a cluster getting all that done, but here we are again. What I wanted to do tonight, especially, is to spend a little bit more time on the tax situation. We covered some planning factors and also some tax strategy, but really, there's a lot of things you do, unfortunately, kind of in the way things work out, that are going to be focused on taxes. And, you're going to be, like I say, the reason the tax code exists and the reason it's so complex is to, kind of modify your behavior. I mean, there's things that are in the tax code are in there for a reason. Somebody is trying to motivate you, manipulate you. And again, I'm not a big fan of some sort of simplified tax code would be much better. But in the short run, certain industries like real estate and other things would just get clobbered. So I don't see it changing right now. So unfortunately, a lot of the behavior you're going to do in terms of personal finance is going to be guided by trying to pay the least tax possible. So we'll look at all that. It's sad to say, but you can make a whole lot of money out there and not be smart about taxes and come out worse off than somebody who's is a little smarter and avoids some of the pitfalls and ends up keeping more of that money. Also, I've got some inputs from some of the people on the homework, and so I wanted to review a couple of those problems. So before we jump back into the tax thing, I've put some of the problems on here, and a couple of these things are, real easy in terms of like the rule of 72. I think everybody understands this, and it's just a real quick way to figure out when you're looking at an investment. When somebody says, whatever, I can give you 2% interest, well, you do the math there, and you're going to realize that is going to take an awful long time to double. So even a 6% takes about 12 years, and the different ones. Anyway, you'll get to figure it out. But if you just have those numbers in the back of your head, and that number under B, that 10%, believe it or not, before taxes, that's what the expectation is out of the stock market. So again, that can be individual stocks, which is a lot dicier. There's going to be a lot more volatility, and maybe on average people might get 10%, but there's going to be some people who are going to do very well, and other people are going to get clobbered. So mutual funds, which are a collection of stocks, typically they can be a collection of a lot of different investment vehicles, but typically a collection of common stock, and overall they have been getting about 10%. Now again, we had a year last year where people were getting 34, so that means back in 2007 they're getting nothing or losing significantly. So again, it's a long-term game for most of those investments. The value of money type stuff, again, that's just to sort of illustrate that the power of getting started early and kind of how to use those tables and the rest of that. I don't think too many people had a problem with that, but these slides will be posted into the material section, so go back and review if you weren't clear. This one in particular, this problem, some people, whatever, rightly or wrongly, on the homework, I guess it doesn't necessarily say, by a dollar figure how much better off you would be, but would you prefer a fully taxable investment earning 8.1 or a tax exempt earning 6.1? And what you're really looking for is a dollar figure, because that's how you're going to, these things are going to be very close in terms of investments, because it's going to be competitive. So just because something's a tax-free, a tax-free muni doesn't necessarily mean it's a great investment. What you need is to look at the investment or the interest rate that investment is earning, and then compare it to something that's fully taxed, and then look at your tax rate, your marginal tax rate, and see whether it really is a better deal or not. So you can't absolutely say, oh no, I'd absolutely prefer a a tax-free muni, or I prefer a taxable account, because the interest rates, especially if they're a face value type thing like a bond, it's very easy to do that calculation. So again, the math is there. The solution for the bottom one, I'll look at 10th edition there, 28% tax rate, and that's 0.72. That's derived from 28% tax rate, right? That's what's left out of there. So that 10.2, when you subtract out that tax rate that you'd be paying, that 28%, that actually equals an after-tax interest rate of 7.34%. So in this case, the tax exempt is a better return, and something you'd be interested in. But you have to do the math to calculate that, and the point I was trying to make is that it's just not that easy to just blanket say that it's going to be better or worse. On financial planning, what I've done is I've looked at some of these slides from last week, and we're going to go back through and look at some examples to see what can go on in terms of taxes. And again, you will pay definitely a fair amount of taxes in your life, and avoiding taxes, not evading taxes. Evading taxes is illegal, but avoiding taxes is what you do. I mean, avoiding taxes and putting your money to work for your own good is noble. I mean, you can do lots of things with your money. You can take care of your family. You can give to charity. You can do lots of things. But first, you have to have that money. You have to retain that money. So, one of the issues that goes into this is, how do we end up in this situation? And I'm not trying to get political here, but you have programs that come along, especially government programs, that are going to be funded by taxes, and a lot of times they'll come up with the program. They're going to hire more teachers based upon their new forecast and taxes. Well, guess what? A lot of times those taxes don't work out, especially on some of these sin taxes, 60% below what they thought they were going to get in Colorado. And the thing is, people will move away from taxed items. What's happening here is people are just buying the stuff on the street, so the government's not going to get that tax. Here, the same thing with cigarettes in New York. They call them Lucy's, whatever. They're selling black market cigarettes, so they can have a huge tax on cigarettes, but you can't count that as tax revenue until you actually earn it, and the city is not earning that. Is it even affecting the number of people who smoke? Probably not, because they're obviously able to buy them on the cheap through organized crime largely. So again, it's a difficult proposition. There's another thing here too that I referred to in class, and I don't like to refer to things and not give you kind of the background. This isn't really that controversial. It's kind of common sense. A guy named Art Laffer. Anyway, this is just basically a theory that's kind of been proven out, that there is a certain level where taxes increase, where you can increase the tax rate and revenue will go up. But when you get to a certain point, they will avoid that activity that's causing the taxes. So there is a certain point where taxes are going to stop. What the government is better off doing is looking for a lower tax rate with more people paying it, and then their total revenue goes way up. So it's actually true that a lower tax rate will often get the government more taxes. But okay, so enough of tax, politics type stuff. But what I wanted to get to tonight was just a kind of a quick discussion on the implications of taxes. Let me see. I'm just looking at the notes here. Nobody had any questions yet. If anybody had any questions on those homework problems that I went over, please chime in as we're going, so we can cover that tonight before we chime off. But anyway, taxes and financial planning. So this whole notion of doing a trial run of your taxes before the current year, whatever. This is to check and see how the numbers work out. let me just show you. I was going to run an iteration of TurboTax in here, but it's not supported by the Collaborate browser. So whatever. It was a great plan to have a live, internet thing where we could actually look at the web pages and work through it. So what I had to do was just pull some screenshots, but we can still make the point we're trying to make. There are things you can do, elective things that you have total control over, that will greatly affect the amount of taxes you're paying. So again, I know people may be using 1040EZs or just doing some quick e-filing because you don't have enough income, enough deductions to worry about. I fully understand that, but when you do get to the point where you are just doing a straight 1040 and you're itemizing deductions, this stuff is going to be very, very important. Now, depending on what your career, what it leads you to, if you're most people, you'll be paying a 401k, hopefully. 401k is what has happened as an industry. As I said, there's been a very marked transition from pension plans and defined benefit plans and this sort of one-size-fits-all, here's your retirement plan type thing, to individual retirement plans where the onus is on you. In some aspects it's good because, well, first off, it is good that this transition has happened as people have been basically more portable in their jobs. The anticipation of somebody going to one firm, one company, one organization and working for 30 years, that doesn't happen too often anymore. So the portability of 401ks and 403bs and TSP and all that other stuff is nice. I'll go through each one, but these guys are not that different. We'll have some retirement planning, but a 401k is a individual retirement thing, so it sounds almost like an IRA. But what you do is this can be invested in, well, you can do it on a lot of things. People don't realize you can actually put it in real estate and other things if you want, but for most folks, they actually end up putting in some sort of mutual fund. And what happens is this money comes off of your income before taxes. So I'll show you that on a W-2, how that actually works out. A 403b, that's really not a different type thing. In fact, they're fairly transferable, but it just means you're in the education type career field, and they use a 403b. And then a TSP, Thrift Savings Plan, military version. So for me, I had money in a TSP. I got out. As an educator, I rolled it into a 403b, or I could have put it in a 401k. I also could have done something with an IRA, but IRAs have stricter limits. The limits on TSPs, 401ks, 403bs are pretty uniform, and it will vary by the tax year, but for most folks, it's about $17,500. So just short of $20,000 that you could, take off your income. Now, it's not a completely free lunch. What's going to happen here is when you retire and you start drawing on this at 59.5 is typically the earliest that you can withdraw on these things. There are certain exceptions for some hardships and stuff, but typically 59.5, you start withdrawing on that. And the idea is that you're probably cut back on work if not retired. And because of that, your tax rate is going to be lower. You aren't going to be making, as much as you were. So now when you do pay the taxes that were never paid on it before, that is done at the lower rate. So you'll also hear of a Roth IRA. Won't talk as much about that tonight, but a Roth IRA, you're taxed on it normally. Up front, you're taxed on it. But anyway, there's more to a Roth, and we'll talk more about that later. We'll also talk about home mortgage interest deduction. Again, a couple things about home mortgage interest deduction. Number one, in terms of investment, and I'm telling you, you can do very well in the stock market, but you can do even better in real estate, theoretically, especially since you're leveraging. Typically in real estate, you're using borrowed money, so maybe real estate is only going up by a few percent each year. The fact that you're using say 25,000 to control 300,000, that $300,000 that you're controlling, that's your leverage. You're earning interest on $300,000 as that asset appreciates, yet you're doing it with only 25,000. So now there's going to be a trade-off there with the interest paid on the mortgage and all that, but in this case, the interest is deductible since it's your own home. There's other things too. If you sell stocks 3, 4, 5 years from now, doesn't matter. You're still going to pay capital gains. If it's your home, you live in it 2 out of out of the past 5 years. There's limitations. 2 or 3 years out of the past 5 years, you can keep those capital gains up to certain limits again. So that is huge. Number one, the ability to have a pretty secure asset, something that's going to appreciate typically in most markets, and again, the only time you lose money in an investment, even if it goes down, when people say, "Oh, I lost whatever amount of money in the stock market," did you sell today? If you didn't sell today, then you didn't lose anything yet. You may lose, but it'll go all over the map. So, again, the other downside of real estate too, you all now know that it can go down as well as up, but I would still argue that it's far safer, far less volatile than stocks, but it's also not very liquid. If you need cash for something in a emergency type situation, the delays are such with real estate that it's not suitable for that. And then tax credits versus tax deductions, we hit on that a little bit last week. A credit is a credit. You owe $10,000 in taxes, you get a $1,000 tax credit, you owe $9,000 in taxes. Now the difference with a deduction, that same $1,000, it just gives you that percentage based upon your tax rate. Typically, that 28% again, we figure on not the high end, but on the upper end for what we're talking about in terms of normal income until you really start making some money. You get up into a different bracket. So anyway, I don't see too many comments. So hopefully this is making sense. But anyway, everything throughout the course is going to be kind of flavored by what are the tax implications. What is this going to cost me, and what am I really going to be left with net? So in this case, I put some bogus information into TurboTax, and again, TurboTax, TaxCut, different software. But what I want to do is I want to just show you, sort of the power of using some of this tax software. Apologize if this is a bit of an eye chart for you on this slide. You'll be able to see it full up to speed on a regular PowerPoint presentation. But what I want to show you here is just that you can plug in numbers, and you can see bogus Social Security number. I put that single guy living in Alaska with one kid, okay, and that personal refund of $5,300 up in the left corner there. Automatically, I'd say that's pretty high. Somehow, next year in terms of tax planning, we ought to fight to get that down around $1,000, something like that. Certainly, you don't want to owe the IRS too much money, but if this was our final number, I would feel that I kind of screwed up in my tax planning, because that's a lot of money that I more or less loaned the government for that year, that they're now going to give me that money back. And again, it's kind of a sign of somebody's ignorance when they think, "Oh man, I just got $5,300 back from the government." No, you gave the government a loan for $5,300 for this entire year, and you got no interest off it. So don't do that. Now again, the thing about TurboTax or any of these other programs is they're very dynamic. So that number will shift around as you make changes, which is good. And which also is good in this scenario, or you getting on and using some of the software, you can make changes to your situation or find out how changes are going to affect your situation and what effect they're going to have. So you don't wait till April 15th and find out, you're going to be paying penalties because you owed so much money, plus you have to come up with that money, or you had some, huge amount of money that you were leaving on the table. You can adjust the withholdings by adjusting your deductions, and also you can change things a bit by literally adjusting your income. And I don't mean quitting the job. I mean by taking full advantage of the 401k or whatever your tax deferred vehicle is that I discussed before, within your limits. You know, I realize, you know, certain situations you got to do what you got to do. If you're carrying, you know, 20 grand in credit card debt and you want to put more money in a 401k, that might be a bit misguided. You know, I can guarantee you, you're pretty much going to lose 14% on a credit card outstanding balance. And to think that you're going to get 14% after taxes on an investment is a bit too ambitious. I don't think that's going to happen, especially the risk that you would have to put up with. You know, the risk you would have to endure that things might go south. So pay off your credit cards, get things going, and then maximize your investments. So a little bit more. I changed some numbers in here, so you're going to see these numbers shift around a little bit. In fact, what I did on this one, let's go back one slide. You see it went up to 62.52 in terms of taxes, in terms of refund that I'd be getting back from 5302. So what you can do in here, my income, I changed it. I lowered it down to 80,000. It was 94,800. Yeah, see here's one with 94,800, showing taxes of 5302, or getting a refund of 5302. And here I lower it down to 80,000, and I'm up to 6252. So, you know, that's about $1,000. How would you do that? How would you basically change this number from 9480 down to 80,000 legally? By doing that TSP or that 401k or that 403b. Now, where these numbers actually come out, you know, you set that up on your with your payroll folks to have that deducted directly from your paycheck. So your paycheck, your W-2, everything this is based on is going to shift. And when you go into TurboTax or any of these programs, you sit there with your W-2 and you type in the numbers. Or if you work for a big firm, you know, a big company or whatever, they also have the method to import them. But you can't just change these numbers, but you can do things throughout the year that will change these numbers and affect the amount of that tax. So that's one thing, you know, by taking advantage of, you know, basically reducing your income, you can lower your tax burden. The other thing about that is, in that case, I lowered the taxes by 14,800. Did I really have to sacrifice 14,800? No, I had to sacrifice about 13,000 for the year, or a little more than 13,000, because if I would have tried to get all that cash in my paycheck, I would have paid that penalty of paying that extra taxes. So even if I tried to keep all that money, I wouldn't have been able to. Now the limits are what they are. If you're over 50, you know, then it can go up to about 23,500. But again, that's a catch-up thing. Most of you will not be in that situation for a while. Here's a home deduction. Okay, so home loan deduction summary. So points are something that you pay to buy down an interest rate. We're not going to go there. But you can see that this person is not a renter, and he paid $12,500 in interest. You might think that's a lot, but the way mortgages are structured, you pay a tremendous amount of interest up front. So $12,500, I pay considerably more than that because you can also deduct on a second home. So anyway, $12,500 may seem like a lot of money to be paying in interest, but it's not out of the norm. So my taxes in this case, or you know, all granted, all these numbers are notional, but 5302, it was the refund, and when I take this number to zero, no interest paid, 2552. So you can see that that's $2,500 Well, $2,500, pardon me, that I save by paying that mortgage interest deduction. So, it's a penalty for basically a penalty for renters. So, take advantage of it. You know, there's lots of reasons other than the investment part of it to be a homeowner. You know, the quality of life, the ability to have pets, some of the other things that go along with home ownership. But also, it's a very good investment. Now, if you're a super mobile person, you don't want to be tied down with a house, you don't want all that stuff, completely understand it. But, again, most people, if you're looking at a home, and this is, as being a former real estate agent, salesman, whatever, what have you, look for something that's not too unique. So, something especially for the first half of your life while you're still building things and still got a career that may have some mobility associated with it, you probably want something that's going to be an excellent rental. So, worst case, you turn it into a rental, move down the road, and everything's fine. Rental market is strong. People, the economy, regardless of what they say about the recovery, for most folks it hasn't happened, and that's going to keep the rental market very, very strong because people just can't afford or they can't qualify. Banks are very hesitant to loan, so I would be very confident having a portfolio that included rental property, which I do. Got a blank slide in there. Okay, so let me show you one other thing. There are some videos in here that I completely received this media. This video, if you don't get a chance to see it, it will be in the blog.
As I'm sure everyone knows, and probably ruse, the tax filing deadline is rapidly approaching. With me today to talk about how you can avoid ending up in the IRS's sights and what to do if you do is Scott Estill. He's a former IRS trial attorney and author of Tax This, Standing Up Against the IRS. Scott, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Scott, I think it's fair to say that nobody relishes the idea of getting into a scrap with the IRS. And so I think for most people, the most important thing is to try to avoid getting into that position in the first place. So what are the sorts of things that will trigger an IRS tax audit? What are the red flags that get the IRS's attention?
Well, first of all, you can't avoid an IRS audit if you file a return just because the IRS does do a lot of random audits, but they also look at specific items that may, like you mentioned, trigger an audit. One of the things that they look at is that information that's reported to the IRS, such as W-2 information, 1099, things like that. If you don't report the exact same amounts that are reported to the IRS, an audit will generate. But they also look at statistics too, so that if you're in a particular business or if you have a rental property and your deductions are considerably higher than what they consider to be the norm for that industry, that will generate an audit as well. But that's really what the IRS is looking at, and along with any particular projects that they may be working on. The big one right now is offshore income. So anybody with offshore bank accounts has a much higher rate of audit right now.
Well, given that, what can you do to avoid your chances of being audited? Or barring that, what can you do to make sure that your return will stand up if you are singled out by the IRS?
The first thing you want to do is understand as much as you can about the tax laws, at least those laws that apply to you, or your business or your family. And then I think you also want to make sure that you have documentation for every deduction that you take on your tax return. So that seems to be the real key part. And when I've walked into audits for taxpayers, I've had no problems when I've had all the documentation. When the IRS sees that, they see that we have the documentation for everything. Typically that audit goes very quickly because they want to move on to the next person, and the next person may not be so fortunate with their record keeping.
In your experience, is there one mistake that people commonly make when they're dealing with the IRS, and something that they definitely should not do that will not help their case?
Well, I think there's a couple of mistakes that they do, but I think the first thing is that a lot of people will go in and try to fight the IRS on their own, and that's very difficult if you don't have an understanding either as to the tax laws themselves or to how the IRS operates. I think that's number one. But if you are going to go in and deal with the IRS, maybe it's a small issue, or maybe you do have the confidence or the records to back up your position. I think the major problem with a lot of folks is that they end up talking too much to the IRS. They give the IRS too much information, and by doing so, they may close the door on one issue, but by saying a few things, they may open up another issue that the IRS wasn't going to get into, or maybe even didn't know about. So it gets real difficult into knowing how to reply to the IRS to give them the documents, or maybe the testimony, the oral testimony that the IRS may be looking for if you don't do this for a living. And I think that's really the number one handicap that most taxpayers have when dealing with such a massive bureaucracy like the IRS.
Well, that was a bit like a Godzilla movie, at least on this end. The guy's lips were not quite moving at the same speed. But key things there are, your chance of getting audited in most people's situations are quite low. My chances with foreign income property, pretty high. But again, having all the records is important, and like I say, that gets back to the record keeping that we talked about the week before. Again, most of this stuff can be kept in PDF format, and if you have the better versions of PDF, it's so much easier to, or Adobe Acrobat, it's so much easier to search through those things to track down what's going on. If you do cheat on your taxes, you will, at some point, you got 7 years of potentially sleepless nights worrying about that kind of stuff. So what you want to do is you want to find out what is legal and stick within those lines. Let's just run through a couple more of these slides. I'll see if anybody comments on anything that they were confused on last week. Again, things went kind of quick, and I didn't have any feedback, obviously, since it was just video. But we saw those adjustments to gross income. If you had to pay taxes on the full amount that you made, your tax burden would be considerably higher. You need to get that AGI, adjusted gross income, reduced to the maximum amount possible. We talked about the different types of income, and earned income is typically what we're looking at on the tax forms. The investment income, the dividends, rent, all that kind of stuff is another category, and the passive income. As I said before, passive income, the way it's derived is typically in investments. You may have unlimited liability from a company if that company, does something bad or goes insolvent or whatever, and now you tried to make money with this venture and you ended up losing more than your investment. So that's why it may be wise to be in a legal situation where you are earning passive income, where you invest, say, $5,000 in some sort of real estate venture, and within the laws, you just have a passive participation, which means you can't be actively in there managing, but what that can gain you is your liability in terms of losses can be limited to the amount you have invested. So if you're into something that looks like it's going to be a risky type investment, you want to make sure you know what your exposure is. And if you're in a passive income type state, if you're a passive investor, you want to make sure you don't do anything to compromise that and become an active investor and then be liable for other things. The other income, not that common. Gambling, lottery, doesn't happen too often. Tax exclusions, we talked about that. Tax deferred. So tax deferred, IRA, same kind of category as 401ks and things like that. A good idea, but you will get to a point where you won't be eligible for that, and even when you are eligible for it, the limits on that are quite a bit smaller than an IRA. If you are out, you're getting job offers and the rest of that, you definitely want to look at what the matching policy is of the firm. Many times, your employee contribution will be matched by your employer up to a certain level. So that is a complete no-brainer. Again, I wouldn't advise you to carry a credit card balance, but if your employer is matching your 401k, the true interest rate that you're getting from that type of investment may actually exceed the amount on the credit card. So best solution, pay off the credit cards and do the matching. So anyway, still no excuse for that. Taxable income, again, we discussed that. It's going to be derived, you saw, and my apologies that Collaborate will cooperate and present the web page live, but when you're in one of those tax programs, the online versions, and again, you can use bogus numbers. You can set up an account with, Social Security numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, and it's still you don't have to reveal any compromising data to figure out what's going to happen. Also, you don't have to, at least on the programs I use, you don't pay a dime until you file. So there is no credit card information or any of that passed until you actually file. So you might entertain, 2 or 3 of those software packages if you're really that into it, because at least financially it's not going to cost you just your time. Medical, dental expenses, hopefully you do not exceed that. I mean, in the case I had there, making roughly $100,000, $7,500 worth of medical expenses, and these are, these are the ones that are not covered by insurance. So most people have insurance to still have $7,500 worth of medical. Well, that may be commonplace actually with what's common, but hopefully not. Exemptions from AGI, calculating taxes owed, and again, marginal tax rates. Again, your tax rate as you go up, the first 40,000 may be taxed at 20% or lower. Well, it will be lower, and then when you get up to 80,000, that 80,000 to 100,000 taxed at 28, and off it goes. So those numbers change all the time, but when somebody says they have a marginal tax rate of 28%, that does not mean, $100,000 you have to pay $28,000 worth of tax. No, that means on that segment, that last margin of income that goes from 80,000 to 100,000, you do have to pay 2,800, or no, what would that be? $5,400 worth of tax on the last 20,000. Whoops. Zoomed right through that one. Talked about that. As I said, large refund means there's something going wrong. If you end up having to pay a fair amount of taxes, a lot of times they may the next year request that you make quarterly payments. Just the same, the government does not like to extend you a free loan. Basically, they look at that money in taxes should have been paid throughout the year, so they'll come after you for that and assess a penalty. Taxes, credits versus deductions, like we said, foreign taxes, retirement savings, adoption expenses, mortgage interest, energy savings, elderly, disabled. So anyway, a lot of tax credits in there. Foreign taxes are pretty much a one-for-one. If I have to pay, $500, $700 worth of taxes, property taxes in Europe are nothing. Sales tax is 20%, so that's where they get the revenue. So those type of taxes, property tax, they don't charge too much. Adoption expenses, if you do that, again, it's a social good, so there's some benefits, financially for people to do that. And like I said, mortgage interest, it's good for the economy, but it's also got a huge lobby behind it. The Realtor Association will vigorously fight any changes to that. And so should homeowners, because your investment's going to go down by about 15% if that ever happens. Your options for filing, again, you can try this a couple different ways. The married file jointly or married file separately, single like I said, the only way to get around that is to get divorced every year, which people do sometimes. All right, I don't want to bore you too much with this because we did cover these items last week, so I'll just look and see if there's any comments from anybody in the chat, see if they have any questions. Again, God help you if you go straight to the IRS. I think you're probably better off looking at a tax guide, looking at some advice from Ernst & Young or somebody online, and then confirming it with the IRS. But if you go straight to the publications, a lot of times it's over the top. And a lot of times in the software, it's context driven. So you will do that. All right. Somebody said they couldn't hear me. I hope that's not the case. It's 5:42. We've been going 40 minutes and they're saying they couldn't hear me. That is not good. Anyway, we'll check the YouTube, see if there was a problem. Speaker appears to be working. What else? Tax assistance. That might explain why there's no comment. I'm going to feel really stupid if that was to have happened. But I kind of share my blame if nobody else watched that. What to happen if you're audited, like we said, the video. Make sure you have all your records and be careful. How to manage your taxes once again. You can change things, you can delay deductions, accelerate income. Again, if anybody has any interest in any of these particular topics, please bring it up and we'll explore it further in a future session. And the rest of it, I realize it's getting a bit redundant here. Let me see how many more we've got. Yep. So, okay, just time out here. Was there a problem with the audio on this Collaborate session the entire time? Yeah. All right, my apologies. Well, we'll get this on YouTube, and YouTube will be fine. And that's why I always have the other thing as a backup. So, good. Wow. Collaborate, what a great system. We talked about all the retirement plans and no additional homework. I'll talk to the Technology Center, see if there's an issue. But otherwise, until next week, and I'll send out an announcement if anything different happens. Thanks again.